And now another community in Colorado and across the nation is also under attack and needs our support. To speak about that, I'd like to introduce Amy Zuckerman. She is Vice Chair of the Rocky Mountain Equality Action Fund, a 20-year resident of Boulder, and she is a longtime activist on LGBTQ plus issues. Amy is also executive producer of the podcast Proudly Out of Line with Marty Moore, which covers the politics, entertainment, and culture of the LGBTQ plus community. The link in the podcast will go in the chat. And Amy recently retired from a long career in high tech, focusing on management and leadership development, working for Gallup and Harvard Business Publishing. And I will let Amy take it from here.
Hi and good evening, everybody. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Thank you so much for having me as presenter. And first of all, happy Pride. I'm so delighted to be able to be here during this important month for our community. I'm going to give you a little bit of a background on myself. Just one second, please. Okay, great. So as Tiffany said, I'm vice chair of the Rocky Mountain Equality Action Fund, and I'll be explaining what that means in just a moment. And what I'm going to do now is give you our agenda for today. I'm going to sketch out a little bit of the very active national landscape on trans and non-binary topics in the news. Then I'm going to get into the Rocky Mountain Equality Center and nonprofit that's based here in Boulder. And then I'm also going to talk about the Action Fund. And these are two related but separate legal entities. I'm then going to go in a little bit deeper on three Colorado initiatives that we are seeking to defeat. I'll explain each one and why they are terrible for our larger community, all of us, everyone on the phone. And then I'll be talking about a campaign, a collab between the two organizations, which is called Hands Off Colorado, because we know that a lot of this agitation is coming from out of state. And then I'll also just mention the podcast because I think all of you would really enjoy the podcast, and hopefully you'll sign up and subscribe. So objectives for today, I really want everyone on this phone call, in this Zoom call, to know that you are the perfect ally. You don't need to be anyone else or anyone different. And in my opinion, social change has not happened without allies participating, bringing all their wisdom and their resources. So everyone on this call, you are the perfect ally. I want to keep stressing that. This is no longer a us and them. It is about all of us. I'm going to be touching briefly on the national landscape. It is very disturbing from coast to coast, Alaska down, etc. But I'm going to give you just a couple of things that are actionable. And like I said, I'm going to go through the initiatives in Colorado, how we're organizing, and then just reaffirm what your part is in making our world a better place. So I'm going to start by showing this picture. Gay Pride in Boston, 1986. And what I want to do is tell you a little bit about who's in this picture. So on the left is my friend David. We are all about 19 years old here. My friend David on the left, he was a Southerner. He's now a chef in Montana. One person over is my best friend Marge. Marge is a Haitian immigrant, which will become relevant a little bit later in this presentation. She's a professor in Boston. And then one over is Renee, my partner at the time. Renee was an incredible athlete. I don't know if she still is, frankly, but she's a very high-level doctor in Massachusetts. I believe she's state family practice doctor of the year in the state of Massachusetts. And there's me on the right. I'm carrying literally a piece of French bread. I've gotten some cheese and meats for my friends. So that's me. People ask me what my job was when I was working, and I say, well, it's everything that's now illegal. So DEI, ESG, if you know what that means, it's basically environmental and governance. So I've worked for different organizations, the Gallup organization, the publishing arm of Harvard Business School, and I just wrapped up a 14-year stint at Seagate in Longmont, Colorado. So I thought you'd like to see this kind of blast from the past. You'll notice at the left there's a group holding a banner that says lesbian and gay. I think it's maybe Bugle Corps or some kind of corps. And I just want to affirm that our community, our what we call the LGBTQ plus community, used to be kind of known as the lesbian gay community or just the gay community. And then there was acknowledgement of bisexuals like myself. There was acknowledgement in the 90s of trans people. And I think we're much more accepting and welcoming of everyone and all the letters. So know that it started out pretty narrow and we get better and better. We think more and more broadly as time goes on. What I'd like to show next is a moment that I experienced a few years ago. It's really, it's probably up there in my top 3 experiences in life, which was receiving a community award. And as you see, there's me having a pretty good hair day. And Marty Moore on the left. Marty is CEO of Rocky Mountain Equality. And of course, on my right, on my other side is our incredible US rep, Joe Neguse, who has always been there for our community, not just this year or when Trump came to power. Joe Neguse has really been there, and he's a wonderful and warm and supportive person. And I also wanted to label the 2 folks on the far side. Dave Ensign is an incredible community leader here in Boulder, in the Boulder area, and next to him is his husband, Mike. So after this, I wanted to kind of tee up some things, some actions for you to be considering, keeping in mind as we go through here. I put down a handful. So one is to volunteer to table at your local Pride celebration if it hasn't yet happened. 2, there are a number of really good newsletters out there, and I'm not even going to touch on Substacks and your favorite writers that you might see on your social networks. But 3 really pertinent newsletters are the Rocky Mountain Equality. I think it's a monthly newsletter. We have one coming out from the Action Fund in particular. There's also a specific Hands Off Colorado campaign newsletter. And there is a coalition I'll talk about in a moment called Families Not Politics. That is a wide coalition based here in Colorado. Also, I really encourage you, now we're talking about hands-on pieces here, attend a training that will be coming up from Hands Off Colorado. There was one in Boulder, one in Fort Collins, and now they're going to be doing a virtual training on how to address with your peers the Colorado ballot initiatives. I mentioned the podcast. I'm going to keep plugging that. And then the really important action, the number one action in my mind, is to start engaging with people in your life. I will touch on how we win. I do believe it's in our one-on-one conversations. And your challenges might be those who you would assume were the easiest. So your friends, I'm going to put air quotes, the liberals, the Democrats, whatever. It's time to have those conversations and really get into the nitty gritty. Okay, moving on. Here we go. So I'm going to be talking about Rocky Mountain Equality quite a bit. Mainly because it's such a force here in the Boulder area, but because it became such a force here and started to provide services in other communities in Colorado, the name went from Boulder Pride in the early days and it started in the 90s, to Out Boulder in the 2000s, and now Rocky Mountain Equality, which represents the really broad reach of the organization. So it is a 501c3, it's a nonprofit, and the mission there is at the bottom of the screen. It supports communities across Colorado through programming, services, and advocating for policies. These are a plethora, a listing of everything that RMEQ does, from programs, lots of youth programs, support groups, then also the queer, trans, and people of color support groups and groups. There is referrals to culturally competent counselors, recovery groups, lots of support groups for parents and family and others, lots of services as well. So there's training provided to organizations. If you want to bring a training to your company or your nonprofit, you might want to look into that. Also, case management for individuals. Resources, it's really a hub to provide a lot of information depending on what your need is. In Colorado, some people call them trans refugees, people who want to find a more supportive environment. They might be coming from Kansas or Texas, and they move here and they need assistance of various kinds. So we're happy to help kind of steward that. And then advocacy. As a classic nonprofit, you may know nonprofits cannot support candidates or endorse candidates. Nonprofits can support causes, ballot initiatives, or rather the issues, if you will. So I did want to highlight on the local and governmental level, Rocky Mountain Equality has helped different municipalities with their proclamations for the Pride celebrations this month. And I've just put a number of the cities, but of course there's many more. And there's many more towns and cities across the state that have issued proclamations that RMEQ didn't participate in. On the podcast, we just interviewed the mayor of the town of Rocky Ford. And if you know where Rocky Ford is, you might know that it is a county that borders Oklahoma in the very bottom of the state. It's a probably more conservative farming community, ranching community. It's where a lot of our cantaloupes and watermelons come from. And they passed a proclamation 6-1 on their city council. So change is happening just all over the state. I did want to highlight this. So as part of the information and the services, Rocky Mountain Equality does have a wonderful page that covers some concerns around if you are a trans or non-binary person and you're a voter and you have questions. Maybe you have a gender marker mismatch with your ID. Maybe you're voting for the first time with a new name. Or maybe you have questions about voting with what they call a dead name, a name that you were formerly known by. And maybe you haven't changed your legal name, but now you go by a different name. And does that mean you have to vote with your old name or your dead name? So there is information, there are resources for those of us who have questions about this topic. And as we all know, voting is, gosh, I don't even know what words to use, contentious in this era, where it never really used to be in my experience, certainly not to this extent. Okay, I'd like to touch on the national landscape, and there's so much to say. And I'd like to touch on this comment, and I can't see the comments in the chat, and I can't see the chat quite, but I think it's really important that we unpack what happened in the last couple of weeks. So we had this MMA fight. We had this cage match on the lawn of the White House, and one of the fighters called Michelle Obama, a former first lady, a man. And now he has tried to retract that and backpedal and say, I was giving her a compliment. So this is a wonderful opportunity for all of us to think about gender and race, because when we talk about trans issues, and I'm a cis person, I'm not trans myself, but when we talk about trans issues, we also have to have a race consciousness. And I know this group is, right there on this topic and really interested in this topic. So remember, if we think about our history in the last couple hundred years in this country, white women were labeled as feminine and delicate. And I'm kind of shortening us up here, doing some shorthand here. But remember, that was done in opposition to Black women and women of color. And that was very on purpose. When we think about Black women being labeled as masculine, when we think about our legacy of slavery in this country, the idea of women being labeled as masculine sets them up to do heavy labor, hard labor, and also that translates down into today about Black women not, I'm using air quotes here, not feeling pain. When we look at the difference in Black women's, um, Black mothers' mortality rate, all of this is still happening. It's very much alive today. So I do want to underscore for us, whenever we're talking about gender, we also need to be talking about race. And I did get into a bit of a kerfuffle, a gentle kerfuffle on the social media platform Blue Sky. Some of you may be on it. And we were talking about gender in this one thread, and a man said, and I said, well, let's talk about race and gender at the same time. And this man responded and said, why is it when we talk about gender, someone is to bring up race? And the point is because we're always having the race conversation. So I wanted to address that head on. So let's now go into the national landscape. I think it's very hard for us to think about how we can take action beyond our state. And one thing that I did in my corporate world was to look at what are the government regulations around diversity, equity, and inclusion. And there are two things. One thing that I learned was that when the government is considering issuing a new rule, it's what they call a new rule, there is a public comment period. And anyone can submit. You can be a company and say that that wouldn't be good for the industry. You can also be an individual. So we actually, as individuals, can submit public comments. So I've got two kind of in the fine print pieces, and I'm going to walk through this a little bit slowly. And then in the chat, I'm going to put, when we're finished here, I'm going to put all of the links to the organizations or topics. I'm going to put that in the chat. And I think I'm up to like 8 of them. So it's going to be pretty substantial. So on the left, what we're talking about there is that the Trump administration announced a proposal to rescind the Equal Access Rule. And that guarantees equal access to programs and services funded by the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, HUD, regardless of sexual orientation, gender identity, or marital status. So the changes that they're thinking of making would force recipients of HUD funding to discriminate against our community in these different ways, creating a new different definition of sex defined as an individual's immutable biological classification as either male or female. And we know how that really misses the mark. Requiring placement and accommodations be made in accordance with an individual's HUD-defined sex, rather than a self-identified gender identity. So I'll pause there. Let me go over to the other side of the screen and talk about something that just happened in late May. So this is the Office of Management and Budget, also known as OMB, and many federal grant-making agencies. They issued a proposal, a regulation for federal financial assistance. And this would codify policies from the Trump administration's executive orders. So what this means is putting into practice those very, I'll say brief, if you will, brief executive orders that Trump has signed on to. This is making it real. This is talking about funding. This is about putting down in our nation's laws. So just to touch on a couple of these bullet points. Some of the many proposed changes and restrictions include prohibiting the use of federal grants to fund, promote, encourage DEI. Okay. Next one, prohibiting federal grants from being used to fund, promote, encourage, subsidize, or facilitate what they call gender ideology, which is not an ideology, and theories or ideologies that deny the biological reality of sex or the sex binary in humans. And I'm not going to do a lecture on hormones and how we determine gender and the difference between gender and sex. That is a different lecture, and it's a really good education, I'll say. But what these two pieces do is that they create hard and fast definitions of what it means to be male or female, or the notion of gender. So I think what my point is here is learn for yourself the variations that we can have in terms of gender and sex, and then come back to these proposed rules and see that the government is trying to create some extremely narrow definitions that simply don't apply in our human experience. So now I'm going to shift into the state's landscapes. And this is also the national landscape. Actually, before I move to that, I do want to underscore again that you have the power as an individual to submit public comment on a proposed rule at the federal level. You don't have to work through your congresspeople or your senators. You have the power. You have as much power as Apple Computer or Microsoft or Halliburton. You have the power to submit public comment. Okay, on to the states. I had to stop. I had to pick a point in time to stop gathering headlines across the nation. Here are a handful. So Washington has a ballot measure to bar trans students from girls' sports. Gender-affirming healthcare is in peril in West Virginia. In Michigan, there is a House candidate whose opponent tried to take her down for being trans because of how her gender showed up on paperwork. An intersex teacher in Florida says the school fired him. Here in Colorado, SCOTUS, the Supreme Court, rejected our law here in Colorado that banned conversion therapy. And the DOJ is subpoenaing data on trans youth. And Zohran Mamdani, as you know, is New York City mayor. There are issues coast to coast on almost every level for trans people. This is a very perilous time for trans people in every state across the country. States are picking up on Trump's fear-mongering, and organizations are ensuring that ballot measures appear they will be appearing in November on these issues. We have to slice through all of this. We have to remember where we live. We have to bond together with the people in our communities, in our neighborhoods, in our families, in our states. I know that a number of people on this call are not from Colorado, but wherever you live, whether that's Kansas or New Mexico, same applies. We've got to stand together and we have to support each other, because that's exactly what the other side is doing. They're circulating money, support, language, and I believe in Colorado, what the history is that people have tried to get ballot measures on the ballot over and over and over. And to date, they haven't gotten enough signatures. But this year, they did. So in a moment, I'll be showing you what will be on the ballot, because they got enough signatures. And I understand, I haven't verified this for myself, but what I have been told is that the Catholic Church has been one of those organizations that has enabled that. That priests stood up at services at Mass and said there are people waiting outside to get your signature to put anti-trans ballot measures on our ballot in November. So I do want to flip over quickly because I don't want to stay in the place of negativity and anger and frustration. I also want to say that there is resistance. There's all of us on this phone. We are in solidarity. We are warriors 100%. And the courts sometimes are a great backstop to some of the things that are being attempted. So I just grabbed 4 of them. Trans prisoners' medical care remains protected after a flurry of court rulings on Wednesday. And I don't know, I tried to make sure that you could see the date of these stories. This is all in June. Like, so much of this is happening just this month. That's the flurry we're talking about. So this one is about trans prisoners' medical care being protected. Coming down a little bit, Arkansas. People went to the school board and said, listen, you know, or sorry, dozens of people objected to a rule that would have required Arkansas libraries to restrict what they called sexually explicit materials. And these would have been materials supportive of LGBTQ plus literature, would have been supportive of young people. On the bottom, there is news that in Idaho, Republicans wrote a law to throw transgender people in prison up to 5 years for using the public restroom that matches who they are. It was signed into law, and then it was suspended. It ruled that the law was likely unconstitutional. On the state of Illinois coming around, they are just advocating, they're spending a lot of money to advocate to fight anti-trans lawsuits. So the fight is everywhere. Some places the line is being held, and sometimes we are experiencing losses. There's a journalist named Erin Reed, E-R-I-N. She has a Substack. She is trans, and she made the comment on the podcast recently that trans people, what the opposition's effort is to legislate trans people out of existence. And we're not going to let that happen. But just like me, you are seeing and you will see these court cases, these proposed rulings try to do just that. And what we have to do is fight for the lives of people in our community. And by the way, if you say I'm an ally, I'm talking to you right now. You're in the community. I'm including you. Okay, so let's move on from here. I'd like to talk about the Rocky Mountain Equality Action Fund. Now, as I said, Rocky Mountain Equality is a 501c3. It's a nonprofit. The Rocky Mountain Equality Action Fund was formed so that a related group could advocate and endorse candidates and to lobby. So here is the mission. We say it's for Colorado, but also across the Rocky Mountain region. Again, the group has been around for about 2 years, so we're going to keep moving and educating, using grassroots organizing, lobbying efforts. We have really dug in on candidate endorsements. We have so many races here in Colorado. So we've already made a number of endorsements, and more are coming out. As you all probably know, but just to remind you, the primary elections are coming up June 30th, so not too far away. And we have made endorsements. So I'll make sure that you all have the link to get on the website and go through all of the races for our senators and representatives, governor, attorney general, all the way through. So down to 2 county commissioner races, a number of people for Colorado Board of Education, and lots of Colorado state representatives and senators. So I put a purple arrow there because this is a place where you can sign up for the newsletter and learn more. Out of 19 races, our recent endorsements, for candidates, those folks were elected in 14 seats in 2025. So we call that a 74% success rate. To be frank, the RMEQ Action Fund, in my mind, is building political power so that when we say this candidate is LGBTQ plus friendly and supportive, it means something, and candidates want that endorsement. That's what we're all about here. This should be a goal for a candidate to get the endorsement. So all of these folks, these are school districts, and all of these folks were elected to their school board, to their, school districts and school board. So great candidates. We have wonderful people in Colorado. You know, we're fighting the good fight against organizations like Moms for Liberty, which I'm sure I hope you've heard about and have on your radar. And I believe that the Action Fund started by looking at the school board races. For me personally, I believe it was last fall when I heard that a woman on the Thompson school district's school board wore an anti-trans t-shirt to a school board meeting. And I heard about it, and I just got in my little hybrid car, and I drove up there. And I thought, well, I will testify in front of the school board, and I'll speak up for trans kids. And I got there. Not only was the room full of pro LGBTQ plus supporters, the building was full, and there were hundreds of people gathered outside the building where the meeting was being held, all in support. And it really warmed my heart. Actually, I kind of lost it, to be frank. It is a reminder that the community has the support. The opposition is vicious, but we can be strong together. So moving on, I'm going to dig into what's going to be on the ballot in November. It'll be there, and these are the conversations we need to be having with our friends, with people who we think are pretty liberal. I'm just going to use that word, whatever, kind of quick and dirty, who we think are liberal. The conversations we need to be having with friends and family in deep red parts of Colorado. Conversations that we need to be having with people we don't really know, but who might be confused about the measure on the ballot. The first ballot measure that the Action Fund has taken a position on is mandating law enforcement coordination with ICE. Now, you may be thinking, why? Isn't RMEQ, the Action Fund, isn't that an LGBTQ plus organization? It is. And remember when I showed you that picture of Boston Gay Pride and my bestie, my best friend Marge, and how she was a Haitian immigrant and queer. Queer people are immigrants. There are some immigrants who are queer. We are all together and we are working in coalition. And if you know about the concept of intersectionality, one person can hold both identities. So for that reason, and also to be a good ally, the RMEQ Action Fund has taken a position on this. What it means is that, by the way, it would be a constitutional amendment in Colorado that would require law enforcement to refer undocumented immigrants charged with a violent crime or charged with any crime and a previous felony conviction to ICE. So, to be clear, just being charged, not being convicted. So I put some notes here about why it's bad. It overrides existing state law and it codifies discrimination into our state constitution. People only need to be charged or accused. They don't need to be convicted, just charged. And as we know, I put this in all caps, as everyone on this call knows, innocent people may wind up in ICE concentration camps. So for that reason, for those reasons, we say vote no and talk to your neighbors about this. Okay, let's move on to Initiative 109. Again, this will be on the ballot. You know, I said a few words at Boulder Pride, the Boulder Pride celebration a couple weeks ago, and I was talking about these initiatives, and I said, you know, can the crowd guess? Can you guess what ballot initiatives we're going to be facing? And it's so predictable. ICE, here's this one, trans people in sports, in schools. And if you can't guess the next one, it's about gender affirming healthcare. It's so predictable. It's so predictable. It's happening across the country. Okay, let's talk about what this is going to be looking like in Colorado. This initiative will ban trans students from competing in sports in categories aligning with their gender identity in public schools. And this would require individual schools to enforce the ban. That means it's down to if you're a parent and you have a child in a particular school, it's down to that school's understanding of this and how they're going to enforce it. So I put a few notes here about why it's bad. First of all, it forces students to publicly confirm their gender. So how are you going to do that? This is a really poorly worded and thought of ballot initiative. So what you're doing is you're opening students up to some kind of gender inspection. Now, you might say, well, in my school district, people are pretty sophisticated and they wouldn't do anything untoward. Do you think that is going to be common across the state? Do we even know? Also, it doesn't define what a sport is or a club is, or is a trans person going to get kicked out of a chess club? Like, at what point? What does that even mean? What are we even talking about here? I want to highlight the third box. Creates a subjective gender norm of any girl who appears too tall, too strong, or has the wrong haircut. Okay, I'm going to come back to the picture I put up of Boston Pride and my partner at the time, Renee. Renee was a phenomenal athlete starting in early grade school. She wanted to play football, and I met her in 6th grade. And I remember her walking down the hall clearly, because I'd never seen anything like it, walking down the hall in a football outfit, uniform. I'm saying outfit because of me. She's in a football uniform carrying a football helmet because she wanted to play football and her parents said, do it. And the school said, and this is in Oklahoma, mind you, the school said, play with the boys. You want to play with the boys? Play with the boys. So if this initiative passes, she would probably not be able to do that. She wouldn't, even though she's a cisgendered woman or girl, she were a girl, she wouldn't be able to play with the boys. She wouldn't be able to play football. She would be assigned to not play because it would be unlikely there would be enough girls to form a team. So please keep that in mind about how we think about young people and even adults, about what the codes are to be male and female and how narrow they can be, and how basically there's a lot of spillage over the binary, if you will. A couple things related from this. It really prevents students from hanging out with their friends and doing an extracurricular activity. And it really ostracizes a group that already faces a lot of ostracization. And by the way, if you're thinking we're talking about large groups of people, this is This is onesie twosie, folks. This is not a lot of people in the state of Colorado. But keep that in mind as we go to the next one around gender affirming care. And pardon my frustration here, but if people think a lot of trans kids are going out and getting surgeries in Colorado, it's not happening. It's really not happening. That's not what's happening here. What we have is fear mongering about the relatively few trans students we have. What this Initiative 110 would do is to ban youth gender affirming care. Now they've thrown in the word surgical as a red herring, I don't want to use the term dog whistle, but as an inflammatory language. So let me tell you what's terrible about this. Essentially, it politicizes the healthcare meetings between parent, child, and the healthcare professional. It's similar to reproductive rights conversations and having those politicized. So you're a parent, you have a child, you can't get the gender affirming care. That could be therapy that your child needs. It could be hormones, and that's probably what most of it might be. And also, if you are a healthcare professional, whether you're a mental health counselor, whether you're a doctor, you would be prevented from providing what would be age appropriate, your advice, your treatment. You would also not be permitted to practice your profession, essentially. So again, you have these three measures. They gathered enough signatures. They will appear on the ballot. What we have to make sure is that people you know and people I know aren't surprised when they see them and they vote in discrimination. To help with this, there's now I'm calling it a collab. There's a collab between Rocky Mountain Equality and Rocky Mountain Equality Action Fund. And the collab has resulted in a campaign called Hands Off Colorado. A while back, Rocky Mountain Equality did a survey around LGBTQ plus issues in school districts. And one of the survey questions asked about what are the values of Colorado? What are the values that we hold in this state? And consistently people said fairness, freedom and fairness. And that's what we value here. I'm not conjecturing here. This is what surveys say. These are our state values. So we know that there are agitators who want to upend, that want to upend freedom and fairness. So that's why we say hands off Colorado. There are pressures on our state to make us not who we are. So this campaign has already been successful. It's pretty new, launched just months ago. And here's some updates. There's nearly 600 people who have pledged to vote no on these three initiatives. And I'm going to put in the chat a link for you to sign up. Rocky Mountain Equality and the Hands Off Colorado campaign has also joined a really cool coalition. And this is in the state of Colorado, where wonderful organizations have come together to join forces to say, we have to say no. And they're talking about 109 and 110 in specifically that pertain to trans folks. Third, there have been volunteer trainings. And what these volunteers are being trained to do is to hold conversations with the public, show up in different spaces such as the Pride celebrations. I think they're hitting 13 or so far across the state to hold conversations with people and do that effectively and be one-on-one with people. So 2 trainings have been held. I attended the one in Boulder, and we must have had, 60 people. And the same in Fort Collins. And they're about to do a virtual training, so that'll be great. Can reach more people. And then Pride Month, been all over Pride Month around the state. And also, if you think about you're part of a group, or you can think of an event where Hands Off Colorado can show up, then Nia, she's the campaign manager. You can write to Nia, or you can write to me. Get in touch with my email address. Happy to guide you. So here is the coalition across Colorado. It's called Families Not Politics. Again, how do we get politics out of just raising children? And so RMEQ is now in coalition with these organizations: One Colorado, Planned Parenthood, Inside Out Youth Services, Cobalt, the Transgender Law Center, and it's a whole coalition of doctors, teachers, coaches, faith leaders, all coming together to say, hands off Colorado, and let's protect our trans youth. So that's another newsletter you can sign up for. So how we will win. Now, some of us are old enough to remember when Amendment 2 passed in Colorado. What that did was basically allow discrimination against LGBTQ plus people. And that was the campaign to fight that stretched from just across the state. And it was a while until Colorado stopped being known as the hate state. And I know that one thing that was eventually successful was one-on-one conversations. Billboards are good, and the protests that I attend, my visibility warriors protests, are great on the overpass that I go to every week. But really, it's gonna come down to one-on-one conversations with you sitting down with, as I put, you both your liberal and your conservative friends. Because your liberal friends and family, they might get in the or look at their mail-in vote, ballot, however they vote, and they might be confused by the vague language. So it's really important that we get with folks before they're looking at their ballot. Those ballot initiatives are designed to confuse and designed to have a particular outcome. So we have to get in front of that, and we have to have those conversations. Also, meeting a trans person. I do not have a trans co-presenter on this call because this is my work to do. This is my way of being an ally to other trans people. One thing I am doing is leveraging my voting precinct. So if you are a registered Democrat, that is an easy way to get in touch with voters and the people in those positions. Your precinct captains, they can help you work with your neighbors. You can also do something very casual. Put little invitations on people's doorsteps or in your neighborhood, Facebook group or email list, and invite people for a potluck and call it a study session. Let's have a study session around trans issues and talk to them. So these are the things that we should be thinking about as individuals. As my time is coming to a close, I want to highlight the podcast called Proudly Out of Line with Marty Moore. Marty, again, is the CEO of Rocky Mountain Equality, and she has been around in the national scene, as she calls it, the movement, capital T, capital M, for decades. And what that means is that she knows a lot of people, and she's able to get, along with some help and networking, hardcore networking, by myself and others, some amazing people really on the national level. The most recent one at the end of May was with the journalist Erin Reed, who has the Erin in the Morning Substack. And Erin is so sharp, and I really recommend taking an hour of your time and listening to Erin and Marty having that conversation. Before Erin, we talked to Simon Kent Fung, and Simon has a wonderful podcast he created, only, I believe, 9 episodes called Dear Alana. And Alana was a queer person who lived in Boulder and ended her life. And Simon talks about conversion therapy, what that means. And he's a deeply spiritual person, so his perspective is fabulous. And in February, we talked to a local trans youth, and Emily shared her perspective, what her life was like, and what her relationship with her school and her friends and her parents and her support group, what all of that was like for her. So this is a wonderful kind of passive way to stay in touch with what's happening and also get a great kind of first person. Okay, so as my time wraps, here is again a reminder of how you can take action. Again, volunteer at your local Pride celebration if it hasn't happened yet. Sign up for all the different newsletters. I mean, frankly, this is how I'm getting a lot of my news, kind of directly from the sources who work on these issues. When you have another opportunity, number 3, attend a training, get some more skills around how to hold the hard conversations, what the climate is in Colorado. And remember, we only have a number of months. It's a number of weeks before the election. It's right around the corner. Hands Off Colorado has the pledge that you can sign up for. And however you feel about signing an online pledge, it's pretty powerful when you see the hundreds of pledges add up. Subscribe to the podcast, yet again, submit a public comment if you are so moved, and start having conversations with people in your life. And I just want to say happy Pride to everybody. It means so much that I have had your ear for this length of time. And I haven't seen the chat. Looks like there's 34 chat messages, and I'll go back and scroll through those.
We
But
can, Sean was keeping track of questions, so
perfect.
he can shoot those at you in a second.
Great.
And I didn't mean to interrupt you, so I just wanted to let one other person say a few words before we do Q&A. Was there anything else you want to add before I do that, Amy?
No, all set. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you so much. So I did want to introduce Monica Van Buskirk. I hope I didn't butcher your last name. She's a longtime volunteer with the Democratic Party who's trying to increase progressive power and influence in politics, and wanted to say a few words tonight.
Thank you, Tiffany, and thank you, Amy, for speaking about this important initiative. I know that we have recently seen an increase in support for our trans community in a way that really heartens me as a member of the LGBTQ community. And I just saw today that Casa de Paz has a process where you can sign up to go visit trans folks who are in detention in ICE. And so anybody out there who loves this intersectionality that you were speaking about, Amy, there is a chance to go support our trans friends and neighbors who have been detained by ICE. And I have a very, very easy way for you guys to start to bring progressive values in a stronger way here to Colorado. So many of you may know that the primaries are happening right now. And as Colorado has shifted to become more strongly Democrat, the way that you can really have a voice is in the primaries. So any of you who is a registered voter, whether you're unaffiliated or a Democrat, you should have received your ballot in the mail already. If you did not, you can go to the Secretary of State's website, and they have a thing called ballot trace. You can see where your ballot is, and you can get instructions on how to get a replacement one if you need it. Getting a replacement ballot is actually very easy. I've done it before. You just go to the election center that's closest to you, and they just print you up a new one. It only takes a couple minutes. But I really want to encourage you guys to vote in the primaries and to vote in all of the races. Your ballot usually starts with your U.S. Senate. Then if you have a congressional race, And then down to your statewide races, we have governor, attorney general, secretary of state, and treasurer this year. And then underneath that are your state level and county level races. Sometimes it's a little bit overwhelming to see so many races to vote on. But there are a lot of great groups out there that help give information about how to vote. I'm personally a fan of Working Families Party, and I'm sure Solidarity Warriors has organizations that they support and follow. Rocky Mountain Equality Fund, as you mentioned, Amy, does also have candidates that they support. But this is just one of the levers where we can increase progressive power inside the Democratic Party. I've been volunteering for about 10 years, and I have asked Tiffany if I can come back later and talk to you guys about how to volunteer and show up in ways within the party where we can have more of a voice, and we can make sure that we are centering our LGBTQ friends and neighbors, centering our immigrant neighbors, especially those who are not able to vote, because that is absolutely something that the Republican Party has made a very strong voter turnout issue, is immigration. And it is a real shame that the Democratic Party has not done the same. So, number one, go find your ballot. Number two, fill it out. Number three, turn it in before 7 p.m. on Tuesday, June 30th. And if you can't find it, that's okay. Go to the Secretary of State's website. I'm not sure, Tiffany, if you dropped a link, or I can drop a link where you can find it. So use that lever of power, y'all.
Thanks, Monica. Sean, do you want to go ahead with any questions that we have for Amy?
Okay, the first one, Manna asked, will these presentations and resources be available by email after the chat?
Yeah, I believe Tiffany and company always send out the links.
Yeah, I think they're wondering, will you provide your slides so that I can send them out with the email?
I think so. Maybe if folks wouldn't mind, if you can send me an email first. We haven't really done that yet
Okay.
in this work. So I kind of want to get the green light on that first. But yeah, or even, here's the thing. If you were thinking I'd like the slides so I can do a presentation, let us co-present. Let's do it together. And then it's not.
No, not for that. Sometimes people just like them for reference so
Oh,
that they
okay.
can see
Got
like
it.
what happened. So usually I would just upload them to our website where people could download the presentation or put it on Google,
Okay.
like Google Docs.
Are there bad ballot measures funded by Advance Colorado?
I don't know the answer to that. Monica, I don't know if you do either or anyone else on the call.
I know that the Advance Colorado is funding a huge number of ballot initiatives in Colorado this year. For example, the folks you see at the grocery store or anywhere else that are trying to get you to sign 6 petitions all at once. I was mentioning that someone tried to get me to sign the ban on gender affirming care and told me it was to prevent forest fires. And so I asked for the ballot initiative number. She didn't know it. So like she gave me one number. I was like, come back later because we are at a booth at Cinco de Mayo. And she came back and I was like, that's not a real ballot initiative. She's like, oh yeah, it's here. It's at the bottom of the page. So it should be the initiative number, I believe, is at the bottom of each page that you sign. So always take that, Google it. If they're in a hurry, tell them come back to me later, and look it up because they are flat out lying about what they are asking people to sign. And Advance Colorado is a conservative group from outside of Colorado that's funding to try to get all these initiatives on our ballot. I'll drop, I think, let me get the link to who is Advance Colorado, I think is the link.
I would just like to thank Amy and remind people, even if you're not part of the flag, be the pole, straight and supportive. It's important.
I wanted to ask something, and I know these are ballot initiatives, so it wouldn't apply to this, and I'm in Oklahoma, and we've already passed every law we could to discriminate. But in other states that are going to try to put these laws on the books, would there be any advantage to try to pass amendments to these bills to ban testosterone for older men? Like, half joking, but like, just to try to raise their awareness of what they're really doing. Or like ED medication. And the slogan could be like, act your age. We want men to act their age. Like, would there be any? I mean, I just think it would wake some people up. These are hormones. And the whole thing about, keeping it until you're 19. When do girls have their first period? Between 10 and 13. So you're going to go 9 to 7 years before you're even able to talk about, like, it's just insanity. But happy Pride. I'm so thankful that you're here with us tonight.
I think there's always a place for humor and satire. That's how revolutions were won in some places.